Julian Ashford didn't just want to leave his wife. He wanted an audience for it. That was his first mistake. He stood center stage at the Ashford Global 50th Anniversary Gala, the lights reflecting off his tuxedo like armor, holding a microphone that cost more than most people's cars. He looked down at Catherine, his wife of 30 years, who was sitting in the front row with her hands folded in her lap. The room was silent, waiting for a toast to the woman who had helped build the company from a garage startup into a global empire. Instead, Julian smiled that practiced, shark-like smile, and delivered the execution. "Catherine," he said, his voice booming through the speakers, dripping with a fake, poisonous sympathy. "Loyalty is a beautiful thing, but loyalty doesn't trend, and neither do wrinkles." A gasp rippled through the ballroom, but Julian pressed on, energized by the cruelty of it. "I didn't become a billionaire to spend my golden years with a woman who reminds me of the past. I need the future." He swept his hand toward the VIP balcony. "Ladies and gentlemen, meet the future. Meet Trixie." All eyes turned upward. Out walked a 22-year-old influencer, popping pink gum and live-streaming herself on a phone encased in rhinestones. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked at her screen. Julian beamed, thinking he had just upgraded his life. But when Catherine looked up at the girl, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She stared at the. Before we watch Julian lose his entire empire in the next 20 minutes, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments. If your partner humiliated you on live TV like this, would you cry, or would you get revenge? Let me know below. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was a deep, guttural sound of pure, hysterical disbelief. It echoed off the vaulted ceilings, cutting through the tension like a knife. The camera operators, who had been zooming in on Catherine's face expecting tears, were suddenly confused. Julian's smile faltered. This wasn't in the script. He gripped the microphone tighter, his knuckles turning white. "Stop it," he hissed, his voice losing its smooth, polished edge. "You're embarrassing yourself, Catherine. She has 50 million followers. She is the face of the new generation." But Catherine couldn't stop. She was doubled over, clutching her stomach, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. To the crowd, she looked like a woman who had snapped under the pressure. But Julian, watching her closely from the stage, felt a cold prickle of fear run down his spine. He knew his wife better than anyone. He knew that Catherine Ashford didn't do hysterical. She did calculated. Finally, Catherine caught her breath. She reached for the glass of champagne on the table, took a slow sip, and looked at Julian with an expression that wasn't anger. It was pity. "Oh, Julian," she said, her voice soft, yet somehow loud enough to be picked up by the boom mics and broadcast to the millions watching at home. "You really didn't check her ID, did you? You just checked her follower count." Julian blinked. The insult hung in the air, magnified by the silence of the ballroom. "Check her ID?" Julian repeated, his voice tight with forced amusement. He looked around at the audience, trying to share a joke that no one else was laughing at. "Catherine, have you lost your mind? She's Trixie. She's on the cover of Vogue." He turned to his lawyers in the wings, signaling for them to cut the audio, but they were frozen, staring at Catherine. For 30 years, Julian had been the face of the company, the charisma, the voice, the ego. But everyone in that room knew who the spine was. They knew who wrote the contracts. And seeing Catherine stand there, calm and smiling amidst the wreckage of her marriage, unnerved them. Catherine didn't sit down. She didn't retreat. She took a step toward the edge of the stage, closing the distance between herself and the man who had just discarded her. "You think she's Trixie," Catherine said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously conversational. "You think she's a 22-year-old dropout from Calabasas who likes your yacht. That's what her profile says. That's what her passport says. The passport I watched you pay a forger to expedite last week." Julian's face went rigid. "I didn't," he started, but Catherine cut him off. "But you didn't check the birth certificate, Julian. You didn't check the lineage." She looked up at the balcony, her eyes locking onto the girl in the gold dress. "Tell him, Trixie. Tell him why you're really here." All eyes shifted to the VIP balcony. The girl was leaning against the railing, the very picture of bored, youthful indifference. She popped a bubble of pink gum, the sound cracking like a pistol shot in the quiet room. She took a long drag from her vape pen, blowing a cloud of strawberry smoke over the heads of the board members below. "Don't worry, Grandma," the girl drawled, her voice high-pitched and dripping with vocal fry. He's just upset because he forgot his pills. I'll take good care of his money. I promise to spend it on things that matter. Like laser hair removal. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the back of the room, but Julian looked relieved. This was the girl he knew. Vapid, shallow, controllable. He turned back to Catherine, his confidence returning. You see, Julian sneered. She's a child, Catherine. She doesn't have a lineage. She has a TikTok account. Stop trying to make this into a conspiracy and just stop acting, Catherine said. She didn't shout it. She simply commanded it. And on the balcony, the girl obeyed. It happened in a heartbeat. The girl reached up and pulled the oversized rhinestone sunglasses from her face, tossing them carelessly over the railing. They shattered on the stage floor at Julian's feet. She spit the gum into her hand and dropped it. She straightened her spine, growing 2 inches taller as the slouching influencer posture vanished. The bored, glassy look in her eyes evaporated. In its place was a gaze so sharp, so cold, and so hateful that Julian actually took a step back. Hello, Julian, the girl said. The voice was unrecognizable. The high-pitched whine was gone. This voice was low, rich, and educated. The voice of a woman who had been trained for war. I'm done with the vape. Thanks, she said, looking down at the device in her hand. It's amazing what a man will overlook when he's staring at a gold dress. You were so busy looking at my legs. You didn't notice I was memorizing your passcodes. Julian stared at her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The face was the same, but the person behind it was a stranger. Who are you? He whispered, the microphone picking up the tremble in his voice. Catherine answered for her. That isn't Trixie, Catherine announced to the room. That is Maya Stone. The name hit the room like a physical blow. A collective gasp swept through the front row, the older investors, the bankers, the men who had been around 10 years ago. They knew that name. They feared that name. Maya Stone, Catherine repeated, savoring the syllables. The daughter of Dominic Stone. The man you bankrupted. The man you humiliated. The man you drove to suicide to build this tower. Julian grabbed the podium for support. No, he stammered. Dominic's daughter, she's gone. She moved to Europe. She's a nobody. She was a nobody, Maya called down from the balcony, her voice cutting through him. Until Catherine found me. Until Catherine paid for my education. Until Catherine told me that if I waited 10 years, I would get the chance to look you in the eye while you lost everything. Maya held up the vape pen. She twisted the bottom, pulling it apart to reveal a silver USB drive hidden inside the casing. I didn't just mirror your phone while you slept, Julian, Maya said, a cruel smile playing on her lips. I mirrored the company's servers. I have the emails. I have the wire transfers. And I have the folder you labeled Stone Acquisitions. She held the drive over the railing, dangling it like a sword of Damocles. You destroyed my father for profit, Maya said softly. So I decided to destroy your heart for free. Did you really think I loved you? Or did you just love that I was young enough not to know your sins? The silence in the ballroom was broken only by the hum of the server drives Maya was holding. Julian looked at the small silver device, then back at the girl he had planned to marry. You can't have access, Julian whispered, his voice trembling. My servers are biometric. Retina scan only. Maya laughed, a dark, rich sound that chilled the room. Oh, Julian, you really are a dinosaur. You think technology protects you? You forgot the human element. You forgot that every night for the last 6 months, you fell asleep with your phone on the nightstand. And you forgot that your Retina Scan app has a backup feature, Face ID. She leaned over the balcony, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. You are a heavy sleeper, honey. It took me about 3 seconds to unlock your digital life. And what I found? Well, it's not just the Stone acquisition, is it? Maya turned to the crowd, addressing the stunned investors. He didn't just steal my father's company. I found the black ledger. I found the bribes paid to the zoning commissioner for this very building. I found the offshore shell companies used to hide the toxic waste dumping fees in 2018. And I found the emails where he authorized the use of cheap, flammable insulation in the new affordable housing projects to save 4% on the bottom line. A murmur of horror swept through the room. This wasn't just corporate drama anymore. This was criminal. This was prison time. You're lying. Julian screamed, finally snapping out of his stupor. He lunged toward the edge of the stage, pointing a shaking finger at the balcony. She's lying. She's a disgruntled ex-girlfriend. She's mentally unstable. Am I? Maya asked calmly. She tossed the USB drive into the air and caught it. Then why are you sweating, Julian? If there's nothing on this drive, why are you looking at your head of security like you want him to shoot me? Julian froze. He had been looking at Brutus, his head of security. He had been silently calculating if Brutus could reach the balcony before Maya could plug that drive into a computer. But he saw the cameras. He saw the red lights of the live streams. He realized that violence would only prove her point. He needed a different weapon. He needed the weapon he had used to build his empire, manipulation. Julian took a deep breath. He straightened his tuxedo jacket. He ran a hand through his hair and composed his face into a mask of tragic disappointment. He turned away from Maya and looked directly at the camera, then at Catherine. He started to chuckle. It was a low, shaking laugh that grew louder, more confident. "Bravo," Julian said, clapping his hands slowly. "Bravo, Catherine. I have to admit, this is impressive. I knew you were angry about the divorce, but I didn't think you would go this far." He turned to the audience, spreading his hands in a gesture of helplessness. "Ladies and gentlemen, look at what's happening here. Look closely. Does this feel real to you? A secret daughter? A spy in my bed? A hidden drive? This isn't reality. This is a script." He pointed at Catherine. "My wife is a brilliant woman. She knows I'm leaving her. She knows she signed a prenup that leaves her with nothing. So what does she do? She hires an actress. She fabricates a story about crimes and bribes to destroy my stock price so she can negotiate a better settlement." The room wavered. The murmurs stopped. Julian was charismatic. He was convincing. And to the wealthy elite in the room, the idea of a scorned wife trying to destroy a man's reputation was a narrative they were ready to believe. "It's a shakedown," Julian said, his voice gaining strength. "It's blackmail. Pure and simple." Catherine watched him, her expression unreadable. "You think they believe you?" she asked quietly. "I know they believe me," Julian sneered. "Because I have proof." He pulled his phone from his pocket and tapped the screen furiously. He held it up to the camera lens, projecting the image onto the massive screens behind him. "You say I'm the criminal?" Julian shouted. "Then explain these." On the giant screen, a series of emails appeared. They were sent from Catherine.Ashford@ashfordglobal.com. Julian read them aloud, his voice booming with righteous indignation. Subject: transfer of funds. To Cayman Holdings. Amount: $5 million. He swiped to the next one. Subject: bury the environmental report. Authorized by Catherine Ashford. Catherine's eyes widened. She took a half step back. For the first time all night, the composure cracked. She looked at the screen, then at Julian. "I never wrote those," she whispered. "Didn't you?" Julian challenged, sensing blood in the water. "These are from your secure account, sent from your IP address. I've suspected for months that someone was embezzling from the company. That's why I hired a private investigator. That's why I was leaving you, Catherine. Not for a younger woman, but because I discovered you were a criminal." It was a masterstroke of gaslighting. He had taken his own crimes, planted the digital trail on her laptop weeks ago, and was now using them to justify his betrayal. The crowd turned. The sympathy that had been building for Catherine evaporated instantly. Now, they looked at her with suspicion. "Security," Julian roared, pointing at his wife. "Arrest her. She is the one stealing from this company. She is the one trying to frame me to cover her tracks. Get her out of here." Brutus, the massive head of security, stepped out of the shadows. He placed a hand on his holster and began to walk toward Catherine. Catherine looked at Maya on the balcony, but Maya wasn't moving. Catherine looked at Julian, who was smiling that shark-like smile again. He mouthed one word to her: "Checkmate." The air in the ballroom felt thin, as if Julian had sucked all the oxygen out of the room with his lie. Brutus, the head of security, was a mountain of a man, 6'5", former special ops, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. He had worked for the Ashford family for 15 years. He moved toward Catherine with the heavy, inevitable stride of a tank. Catherine stood her ground, but for the first time, her hands were trembling. She looked at the fake emails frozen on the giant screen behind her. They were perfect forgeries. Julian had used his administrative access to plant them deep in the system. To a jury, they would be damning. To the press, they were catnip. "Brutus," Julian commanded, his voice sharp with triumph. "Secure her. Detain her in the green room until the police arrive." She is a flight risk. Brutus reached Catherine. The crowd held its breath. The live stream chat rooms were scrolling so fast they were a blur of lock her up and gold digger. Julian watched with a satisfied smirk, already rehearsing the victim's speech he would give once she was dragged off stage. Brutus placed a heavy hand on Catherine's shoulder. The weight of it made her buckle slightly. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Ashford." Brutus grunted, his voice low. Julian nodded. "Don't apologize to her, Brutus. Just do your job." But Brutus didn't pull out handcuffs. He didn't force her arm behind her back. Instead, he unholstered his radio, clicked the receiver, and spoke a code that Julian didn't recognize. "Package is secure," Brutus said into the mic, "but the target is wrong." Julian frowned. "What did you say?" "I gave you an order." Brutus slowly removed his hand from Catherine's shoulder. He turned his massive body, placing himself between Catherine and Julian. He crossed his arms, staring at his boss with a look of utter disgust. "I don't work for you anymore, sir," Brutus said, his voice booming without a microphone. "My contract is with the Ashford Trust, and the trustee is her." "What is this?" Julian screamed, his composure finally shattering. "Mutiny? I'll fire you. I'll fire all of you." "You can't fire anyone, Julian." Maya's voice cut through the chaos from the balcony. "Because you're too busy confessing." Julian spun around. "Shut up. You have fake emails? I have real ones. I have proof." "You have a forgery," Maya corrected calmly. "And you know how I know? Because I was listening." She held up her phone to the microphone. "Everyone, please silence your devices. I'd like you to hear a recording from 11:45 p.m. last night. Location, the master bedroom." She pressed play. The audio was crystal clear. It blasted through the gala speakers, echoing off the walls. There was the sound of ice clinking in a glass, and then Julian's voice, arrogant, drunk, and undeniable. "It's brilliant, Vance," the recording of Julian said. "Once I dumped Catherine on stage, we leaked the fake emails. I planted them on her laptop this morning. We frame her for the embezzlement. She goes to federal prison, and I keep the assets. By the time she gets a trial, Trixie and I will be spending the money in Rio." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a grave. Every person in the room, the investors, the press, the waiters, stared at Julian. The fake emails on the screen suddenly looked ridiculous. The narrative he had spun seconds ago disintegrated into dust. Catherine stepped out from behind Brutus. She looked at her husband, whose face had turned the color of ash. "You planted the evidence, Julian," she said softly. "But you forgot that I planted the bugs." Julian looked like a trapped animal. His eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an ally. It's a deep fake," he shouted, his voice cracking. "AI. It's an AI voice clone. They're setting me up." He turned frantically toward the wings of the stage where his lead attorney, Vance, was standing. Vance was the fixer. Vance was the man who made legal problems disappear. "Vance," Julian screamed. "Get out here. Tell them. Sue them. Issue a cease and desist." Vance stepped out of the shadows. He was holding his briefcase tight to his chest. He looked at Julian, sweating and screaming center stage. Then he looked at Catherine, calm and victorious. Then he looked at the FBI agents who were quietly moving into position at the back of the room. Vance was a shark, and sharks know when there is blood in the water. He didn't walk toward Julian. He didn't pull out a subpoena. Vance simply checked his watch, looked at Julian with a mixture of pity and contempt, and shook his head. "I'm resigning, Mr. Ashford," Vance said. "Effective immediately." "You can't resign," Julian shrieked. "I pay you $1 million a year." "You paid me to defend a CEO," Vance replied, turning his back. "You didn't pay me to be an accomplice to a felony." Vance walked straight to the emergency exit, pushed the bar, and disappeared into the night. Julian was alone, truly alone. He stood center stage, the lights blinding him, stripped of his lawyer, his security, and his lies. He opened his mouth to scream again, but the sound was drowned out by a noise coming from the back of the ballroom. It was the heavy, rhythmic thud of combat boots hitting the marble floor. The double doors burst open with a crash that shook the chandeliers. The gala was over. The raid had begun. The sound that followed wasn't the polite applause of high society. It was the distinct, mechanical crack thud of heavy tactical doors being breached. The double mahogany doors at the rear of the grand ballroom didn't just open. They were thrown wide with a force that rattled the crystal champagne flutes on every table. The gala music, a soft, ambient jazz track that had been playing ironically through Julian's meltdown, cut out abruptly, plunging the room into a stark, terrifying silence. Into that silence stepped a dozen figures. They weren't wearing the polite blue uniforms of the local police. They were dressed in navy windbreakers emblazoned with 3 bright yellow letters that every billionaire fears more than death: FBI. For a heartbeat, the room was a tableau of frozen excess. The women in their diamonds, the men in their bespoke tuxedos, and the waiters holding silver trays all stood paralyzed. The contrast was jarring, the violence of the state crashing into the softness of extreme wealth. "Federal agents," the lead officer bellowed, his voice amplified by the acoustics of the hall. "Nobody move. Stay where you are and keep your hands visible." The spell broke. Panic, sharp and jagged, ripped through the crowd. A wave of terrified elites scrambled back from the center aisle, knocking over chairs and dropping drinks, desperate to distance themselves from the stage. No one wanted to be in the frame when the handcuffs came out. The flashbulbs of the paparazzi, which had been sporadic before, now erupted into a blinding staccato storm. They weren't photographing the fashion anymore. They were documenting the fall of Rome. Julian stood alone in the center of the stage, shielding his eyes from the glare. He looked small. Without his lawyer, without his security, and without his narrative, the titan of industry looked like exactly what he was: a fraud caught in the headlights. He watched the agents swarm up the stairs, their movements precise and coordinated. These weren't beat cops coming to write a ticket. This was the Financial Crimes Division. They moved like a pack of wolves that had already smelled the blood. "Julian Ashford," the lead agent shouted, marching across the stage with a warrant in his hand. "You are under arrest for securities fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud." Julian stumbled back, bumping into the podium. His mind couldn't process the reality. He was Julian Ashford. He had dinner with senators. He played golf with judges. People like him didn't get raided. They got subpoenaed. They got meetings in quiet offices with expensive coffee. "You can't do this," Julian shrieked, his voice cracking into a high, desperate register. "Do you know who I am? I am a donor. I am a job creator. Get your hands off me." He swung wildly as the first agent reached him, a pathetic, flailing attempt at resistance. The agent didn't hesitate. He grabbed Julian's wrist, spun him around, and slammed him chest first onto the polished wood of the podium, the same podium where, just 20 minutes ago, he had declared himself the future. "Stop resisting," the agent barked, wrenching Julian's arm behind his back. The cold click of steel handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed through the microphone, broadcasting the sound of his captivity to millions of viewers online. Julian's face was pressed against the wood, his cheek squashed, his dignity evaporated. He looked out at the crowd, searching for a friendly face, searching for someone to save him. But all he saw were phones. Hundreds of phones, held up like candles, recording his demise in 4K resolution. As the agents hauled Julian upright, dusting off his tuxedo lapels with rough indifference, a strange, manic clarity took over his eyes. He stopped screaming and started calculating. He was a businessman, and in his mind, this was just another transaction. A negotiation. "Fine," Julian spat, straightening his tie with his cuffed hands, trying to regain a shred of composure. "Arrest me. Take me in. It's a misunderstanding. I'll be out in an hour." He turned his gaze to Catherine, who was standing quietly by the wings, watching the scene with the impassive gaze of a judge. "You think you've won, Catherine?" Julian sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "This is a minor inconvenience. I have $50 million in liquid cash sitting in the Cayman accounts. I'll post bail before the ink on the fingerprints is dry. I'll hire a defense team that will make this agency look like a circus. Money walks, Catherine, and I have more of it than God." He laughed, a jagged, broken sound. "You can't keep a billionaire in a cage." Catherine walked forward. She didn't rush. Her heels clicked rhythmically on the stage floor, a slow countdown to his final destruction. She stopped 2 feet away from him, close enough to smell the fear sweating through his expensive cologne. "That's the problem, Julian," she said softly. "You're not listening. You keep talking about your money, but you forgot who manages the family office." Julian blinked, a flicker of doubt entering his eyes. "What are you talking about?" "I signed the transfers. The money is in the offshore holdings." "It was," Catherine corrected. Until 9 a.m. this morning. She pulled a folded document from her clutch purse. It wasn't a legal threat, it was a bank confirmation. She held it up for him to see. As your power of attorney, a power you granted me 10 years ago so you wouldn't have to be bothered with boring tax paperwork, I made an executive decision, Catherine explained, her voice steady and calm. I decided that the Ashford family needed to give back to the community. Give back, Julian whispered, the blood draining from his face. I liquidated the Cayman accounts, Julian. All of them. The cash, the bonds, the emergency funds. She smiled, a cold, thin expression. I donated every single cent to the Dominic Stone Memorial Charity for victims of corporate fraud. Julian's knees buckled. The agents had to hold him up. You gave it away? Every penny, Catherine confirmed. It's an irrevocable trust. The money is gone, Julian. You can't post bail. You can't hire a dream team. You can't even buy a vending machine soda. She leaned in close, whispering the final nail into his coffin. You aren't a billionaire going to prison, darling. You're entering the system as an indigent defendant. You'll be assigned a public defender. And I hear they are very overworked. Julian let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream and wasn't quite a sob. It was the sound of a soul breaking. You stole my life. You stole my money. But you can't take the company. I am Ashford Global. My name is on the building. He thrashed against the agents, looking up at the massive gold logo projected on the screen behind him. I am the brand. Without me, the stock is worthless. The board will never fire me because I own the trademark. Catherine sighed, the sound of a mother tired of explaining the rules to a petulant child. She reached out and touched the gold lapel pin on his jacket, the stylized A that represented the empire they had built together. Actually, that brings me to the final item of business, she said. She signaled to Maya, who was still standing on the balcony, watching the carnage with a dark satisfaction. Maya tapped her phone, and the projection screen behind Julian changed. The Ashford Global logo disappeared, replaced by a legal contract. This is the morality clause you signed when we took the company public, Catherine said, pointing to the highlighted text. I wrote it myself. Do you remember? Julian squinted at the text, his eyes watering. It states that if the CEO is charged with a felony involving moral turpitude, such as fraud, embezzlement, or perjury, he immediately forfeits his voting rights, Catherine recited from memory. But there's a subclause, Julian. Paragraph 4, Section B. She leaned in closer. It says that the rights to the name Ashford revert to the primary trustee in the event of a criminal indictment, to protect the brand's integrity. Catherine's hand closed around the gold lapel pin on his jacket. You don't own the name anymore, she said. The trust does. And as the trustee, I am issuing a cease and desist. With a sharp tug, she ripped the pin from his lapel. The fabric tore with a loud rip, leaving a jagged hole in his silk tuxedo. You aren't Julian Ashford, the CEO, she said, holding the pin up like a trophy. Legally, you are forbidden from using the Ashford name for any commercial purpose. You are just inmate number 492. She dropped the gold pin into his breast pocket, patting it gently. Keep that as a souvenir. It's the only gold you have left. Julian stared at her, his mouth open, his eyes hollow. He had been stripped of his wife, his freedom, his fortune, and now, his very identity. The man who had walked onto the stage of God was now being dragged off it as a ghost. Get him out of here, the lead agent barked. As they began to drag him toward the exit, Julian didn't scream. He didn't fight. He just stared at Catherine, realizing for the first time in 30 years that he had been sleeping next to the only person on earth capable of killing him. The distance from the center of the stage to the double mahogany doors at the back of the ballroom was exactly 40 yards. For Julian Ashford, it was a death march that felt like it spanned a lifetime. The agents didn't behead him. They did something far worse. They paraded him. As they hauled him down the stairs, Julian stumbled, his expensive Italian loafers slipping on the polished wood. The agents didn't slow down to let him regain his footing. They jerked him upright by his handcuffed wrists, sending a sharp bolt of pain through his shoulders. The physical pain, however, was nothing compared to the social evisceration happening in real time. The room, which had been paralyzed by shock only moments before, had thawed into a frenzy of judgment. As Julian was marched down the central aisle, he looked into the faces of the people he had invited. These were his peers, his golf partners, the senators he had funded, and the celebrities he had vacationed with in St. Bart's. He searched their faces for a shred of sympathy, a nod of solidarity, or even just a look of recognition. He found none. Instead, he saw the unique cruelty of the elite when one of their own falls. The women in their silk gowns pulled their skirts back as he passed, as if failure were a contagious disease they could catch by proximity. The men, who had slapped his back and laughed at his jokes an hour ago, now studied their manicured fingernails or suddenly found the ceiling architecture fascinating. They were already rewriting their histories, erasing their association with him before he even left the room. Then came the sound. It started as a low buzz and erupted into a mechanical storm. Click-whir flash. The press pen at the back of the room exploded. Julian had personally approved the press list. He had paid a PR firm $10,000 to ensure the top photographers were there to capture the debut of his new life with Trixie. Now, those same lenses were shoved aggressively into his face. The flashes were blinding, a strobe light of white heat that exposed every bead of sweat, every line of terror, and the silver glint of the steel cuffs biting into his wrists. "Mr. Ashford, look here. Is it true you're destitute? Julian, give us a smile for the warden. Over here. Did you know she was a spy?" The questions were shouted like insults. Julian tried to duck his head, to shield his face with his shoulder, but the lead agent gripped his bicep hard. "Chin up, inmate," the agent muttered, his voice devoid of pity. "Don't trip on the carpet." They reached the heavy double doors. The cool night air of the exit was just feet away. But before he crossed the threshold, a desperate, pathetic instinct seized him. He needed to look back. He needed to see her one last time. He needed to see if the woman who had loved him for 30 years had any regret in her eyes. He twisted his neck, fighting the agent's grip, and looked up at the VIP balcony. Catherine was standing at the brass railing, bathed in the golden light of the chandeliers. She wasn't looking at the chaos. She wasn't looking at the cameras. She was looking directly at him. Beside her stood Maya, the girl who had worn the gold dress like a weapon of war. As Julian watched, frozen in the doorway, Maya picked up 2 flutes of vintage champagne from a passing waiter's silver tray. She handed one to Catherine. Catherine took the crystal glass, the bubbles catching the light. She held it up in a silent, solemn toast to the man being dragged out of her life. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She didn't cry. She simply locked eyes with him, tipped the glass back, and took a long, slow sip. Then, with the grace of a queen dismissing a servant, she turned her back on him and walked away into the shadows of the balcony. The agent shoved Julian forward. The heavy doors slammed shut with a final, resonant boom, cutting off the light, the music, and the last remnant of his life. Julian Ashford was swallowed by the night. The transition was violent. 1 minute, Julian was breathing air scented with orchids, expensive perfume, and roasting lamb. The next, he was inhaling the sharp, chemical stench of industrial bleach, stale urine, and cold despair. The central holding facility didn't care about his net worth. The intake officers didn't care about his stock portfolio. To them, he was just another body to be processed, another number to be cataloged in the system. The degradation was systematic. Standing in a cold, tiled room under buzzing fluorescent lights that turned his skin a sickly shade of green, Julian was stripped of the costume that made him a man. "Jacket off," the officer barked. Julian fumbled with the buttons, his hands shaking so badly he could barely grip the fabric. Belt, shoelaces, cufflinks, watch. The items clattered into a gray plastic bin labeled property of inmate 492. His Patek Philippe watch, worth more than the officer's house, landed with a dull thud next to his leather belt. Without them, his trousers sagged loosely around his waist. His silk tuxedo shirt, damp with cold sweat, clung to his back. Without the structure of the suit, Julian looked smaller. He looked deflated. He looked like a waiter who had been fired after a disastrous shift. He was marched down a long, echoing concrete corridor and shoved into a holding cell. It was a 10-by-10 steel box with graffiti scratched into the peeling gray paint. The heavy steel door slid shut on a track and locked with a metallic clang that vibrated in his teeth. Julian stood in the center of the cell, shivering. It was freezing, a deliberate, bone-deep cold designed to keep the inmates docile. "This is a mistake," he whispered, his voice cracking. He walked to the bars, gripping the cold steel. "Hey, officer, There's been a mistake. I'm Julian Ashford. He waited for the recognition. He waited for the apology. He waited for the moment the world would realize that a man like him didn't belong in a cage like this. But the corridor remained empty. "I need my phone call," he shouted, panic rising in his chest like bile. "I have rights. I need to call my lawyer." A guard walked by slowly, swinging a ring of keys. He didn't even look at Julian. He just stared straight ahead, bored. "Phones are down for the night, billionaire. Shift change. Sit down. You don't understand." Julian screamed, rattling the bars until his palms bruised. "I have money. I can pay you. I can buy you a new car. Just give me a phone." The guard stopped. He turned slowly, looking at Julian with dead, tired eyes. A faint smirk played on his lips. "I saw the news on the breakroom TV, buddy. You don't have money. You gave it all to charity, remember? You have a public defender named Gary, and he doesn't work weekends. Go to sleep." The guard walked away, his footsteps fading into the gloom. Julian slid down the rough concrete wall until he hit the floor. He pulled his knees to his chest, wrapping his arms around himself to stop the violent shaking. The reality finally crashed down on him. There was no fixer coming. There was no deal to be made. There was no backdoor. For the first time in 30 years, Julian Ashford was completely powerless. He was alone in the dark, and the silence was louder than any scream. The next morning, the sun rose over the city skyline, indifferent to the fact that an empire had fallen the night before. The glass tower of Ashford Global gleamed in the dawn light, standing tall and proud, even as its king sat shivering in a concrete cell 5 miles away. At 8 a.m. sharp, the elevator doors to the executive penthouse suite slid open. Catherine Ashford stepped out. She wasn't wearing the navy velvet gown from the night before. She was dressed in a sharp, white power suit that looked like armor. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, flawless chignon. She walked past the reception desk, where 3 young assistants stopped their typing mid-sentence. The silence that followed her was heavy. It wasn't the silence of respect, it was the silence of fear. They stared at her, eyes wide, wondering if they were looking at a hero or a monster. Catherine didn't acknowledge them. She kept her eyes fixed on the double oak doors at the end of the hall. She pushed the doors open and walked into the CEO's office. Julian's office. The room was cavernous, a monument to male ego. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city he thought he owned. The walls were lined with awards, magazine covers, and photos of Julian shaking hands with presidents. But what hit Catherine first wasn't the view. It was the smell. The room still smelled like him. A thick, lingering scent of sandalwood cologne, espresso, and aged leather. It was the scent of her husband. It was the scent of the man she had met in a college library 30 years ago, the man she had built a life with, the man she had destroyed. For a moment, the mask slipped. Catherine closed the door behind her and leaned back against it, her breath hitching in her throat. The adrenaline of the gala had evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, aching exhaustion. She wasn't just a CEO taking command. She was a widow of a living man. The victory felt cold. It felt like ash. She pushed off the door and walked to the massive mahogany desk. On the leather blotter, exactly where he had left it, was a handwritten notepad. Catherine looked down at his familiar, jagged scrawl. Wedding ideas. 1. Yacht in Lake Como. Ensure press access. 2. Fireworks display, gold/silver. 3. Cartier bracelet for Trixie, the big one. Catherine stared at the list. He had been planning his new life right here, sitting in this chair, while she was at home reviewing his contracts. She picked up the paper. She didn't rip it in anger. She didn't cry. She simply crumpled it into a tight, dense ball and dropped it into the wastebasket. She walked around the desk and sat in his chair. It was too big for her. She had to adjust the pneumatic height lever until her feet sat flat on the floor. She placed her hands on the cold wood, claiming the space. But she didn't start working. Instead, she swiveled the chair around to face the wall behind the desk. There, hanging prominently, was a massive, abstract oil painting of a storm at sea. Julian loved it because he said it represented disruption. Catherine knew better. She knew what was behind it. She stood up and reached behind the frame, finding the hidden latch. With a soft click, the painting swung outward, revealing a steel wall safe embedded in the plaster. Julian thought he was the only one who knew the combination. But Catherine was the one who had ordered the safe installed. She spun the dial, right to 10. left to 26, right to 88. Their anniversary. The safe door popped open. Inside, there were no stacks of cash. Catherine had already moved the money. There were no diamonds. But sitting on the metal shelf, alone in the darkness, was a small, leather-bound notebook. Catherine reached in and pulled it out. Her hands trembled slightly. She recognized it instantly. It was Julian's journal from the early days, the days before the billions, before the ego, before Trixie. She opened it to a random page, dated 15 years ago. November 12th. We almost went under today. The bank called the loan. I was ready to quit. I was ready to jump off the bridge. But Catherine, she fixed it. She stayed up all night rewriting the pitch deck. She saved me. She always saves me. I don't deserve her. I swear to God, if we make it big, I will give her the world. Catherine read the words, and a single, hot tear escaped her eye, tracking down her cheek. He hadn't always been a monster. He had been a man who loved her. And somewhere along the way, the money had eaten that man alive, leaving only the hollow shell she had arrested last night. She snapped the book shut, the sound loud in the empty room. She couldn't dwell on the ghost of the man he used to be. She had to deal with the sharks circling the man he had become. A soft knock on the door broke the spell. Mrs. Ashford? Catherine quickly wiped her cheek and spun the chair around. Her assistant, Sarah, stood in the doorway, looking terrified. Yes, Sarah? Catherine's voice was steady, back to steel. The cleaning crew is here, and the board of directors is assembling in the conference room. They're panicked, ma'am. The stock is down 40% in pre-market trading. They want answers. Catherine nodded. She placed the journal in her purse. Tell the cleaning crew to start in here, she commanded. I want the carpet shampooed. I want the curtains changed. And I want this cologne smell gone by noon. Burn sage if you have to. And the board? Sarah asked. Catherine looked out the window at the city below. Let them wait. They need to remember who actually runs this company. But Sarah? Yes, ma'am. Send Maya Stone in. It's time to pay the bill. The office was silent, save for the hum of the city far below and the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Catherine sat at the massive mahogany desk, the leather-bound journal resting in her hands like a holy relic. She hadn't opened this book in 20 years. She hadn't even known he still kept it. Julian wasn't a sentimental man, at least not the Julian the world knew. The Julian on the magazine covers dealt in quarterly projections and market shares. But the man who wrote in this book? That was someone else. Her thumb traced the worn leather cover. She took a breath, steeling herself against the ghosts waiting inside, and turned to the first page. October 4th, 1994. The handwriting was messy, frantic. It was the scrawl of a 24-year-old dreamer who was running on caffeine and desperation. We can't make payroll. I told the guys we're waiting on a check from the angel investor, but there is no investor. There's just me and the empty bank account. I don't know what to do. I'm going to have to tell Catherine tonight that I failed. She believed in me. She quit her job to support us while I built this thing. How do I look her in the eye and tell her it was all for nothing? Catherine's chest tightened. She remembered that night. She remembered him coming home to their cramped one-bedroom apartment, his shoulders slumped, his face gray with exhaustion. She remembered how he couldn't speak, how he just collapsed onto the cheap sofa and put his head in his hands. But he hadn't told her he failed. He had told her, we'll figure it out. She turned the page. October 5th, 1994. She sold her car. I woke up this morning and the Honda was gone. She walked into the kitchen, put a stack of cash on the table for $1,000, and told me to pay the developers. She didn't even ask if we would make it back. She just said, I'm betting on the jockey, not the horse. I swear to God, I will make this up to her. I will build her a castle. I will make sure she never has to walk anywhere ever again. A tear escaped, hot and fast, tracking down Catherine's cheek. She wiped it away angrily. It was cruel of the universe to remind her of this now. It was torture to remember that the monster she had just destroyed was once a boy who cried because his wife sold her car for him. She flipped forward, skipping years, watching the handwriting change. The frantic scrawl became smoother, more confident. The ink changed from cheap ballpoint to expensive fountain pen. July 12, 2005. The IPO launched. We're billionaires. I looked at the ticker tape, and I didn't feel happy. I felt relief. It's done. We won. But tonight, at the celebration dinner, Catherine looked distant. I tried to buy her that necklace she liked, the diamond choker, but she said it was too heavy. Why is she never satisfied? Doesn't she see what I'm doing this for? I'm doing it for us. Catherine read the words and shook her head. He had never understood. She hadn't been distant because she was ungrateful. She had been distant because he had spent the entire dinner on his BlackBerry, ignoring the friends who had helped them get there. That was the beginning of the end, even if neither of them knew it yet. The money hadn't fixed their problems. It had just amplified his ego. She kept turning the pages, faster now, searching for the moment the man died and the monster took over. August 2015. Dominic Stone is a problem. His tech is faster. If he goes to market first, we lose the government contract. Vance says we can bury him in legal fees, but that takes too long. There's another way. A rumor. A data breach. It's dirty, I know. But if Ashford Global fails, thousands of people lose their jobs. Isn't it my responsibility to protect my employees? One man's reputation versus 5,000 families? It's simple math. I have to do it. Catherine won't understand. I can't tell her. Catherine froze. There it was. The justification. The moment he convinced himself that evil was actually a virtue. He hadn't destroyed Dominic Stone out of malice, initially. He had done it out of a warped sense of duty. He had lied to himself until the lie became the truth. She flipped to the very last entry. It was dated just 3 days ago. October 28th, 2025. I'm leaving her. It's time. She looks at me, and I see judgment. She looks at me, and I see the 24-year-old failure who needed her money to pay the bills. I can't stand it anymore. Trixie looks at me and sees a god. I need that. I need to feel like a winner again. Catherine reminds me that I'm just a man. I'm going to crush her at the gala. I have to. If I don't destroy her, she'll find a way to control me again. It's her or me. And I choose me. Catherine slammed the book shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silent office. He hadn't hated her. He had feared her. He had feared the part of her that knew the truth. That he wasn't a genius, just a desperate boy who got lucky and then got cruel. She placed her hand on the cover of the journal, her breathing shallow. She felt a profound, aching hollowness. She had won the war. She had saved the company. She had destroyed the villain. But sitting here, in his chair, surrounded by his smell, she realized she hadn't just defeated an enemy. She had erased the witness to her own life. The only person on earth who remembered the girl who sold her Honda was now rotting in a cell she put him in. The grief hit her then, not for Julian the CEO, but for Julian the husband. It washed over her in a wave of nausea. She leaned forward, burying her face in her hands, and let out a single, ragged sob. Then, the door opened. Catherine sat up instantly. Her spine snapped straight. Her hands swept across her face, wiping away the moisture. By the time she turned the chair around, the grieving widow was gone, and the Iron Lady was back. I didn't hear you knock, Catherine said, her voice like ice. Maya Stone stood in the doorway. She wasn't wearing the gold dress anymore. She was wearing a tailored black suit, sharp and severe. She looked less like an influencer and more like an executioner. I didn't knock, Maya said, walking into the room without invitation. I figured we were past formalities. The air in the room shifted instantly. The heaviness of the past evaporated, replaced by the sharp, electric tension of the present. Maya Stone walked across the plush carpet with a predator's grace. She didn't look at the view. She didn't look at the awards. She looked only at Catherine. There was no warmth in her eyes, no shared camaraderie of two women who had taken down a titan. There was only calculation. Catherine watched her approach. She knew this moment was coming. She had hired a mercenary, and mercenaries expect to be paid. You were impressive last night, Catherine said, keeping her tone neutral. The vape pen was a nice touch. I didn't know you were going to improvise. I like to stay in character, Maya replied, stopping in front of the desk. She didn't sit down. She stood looming over the workspace, asserting her presence. And besides, Julian always hated strawberry scent. It threw him off balance. Catherine opened the top drawer of the desk. She pulled out a sleek, ivory envelope. Inside was a cashier's check drawn from her private trust. It was the amount they had agreed upon 6 months ago in a dark cafe in Zurich. $10 million. It was enough money to disappear. Enough to buy a villa in Tuscany, a new identity, and a life of leisure. It was a generous payment for 6 months of work. Catherine slid the envelope across the mahogany surface. It stopped inches from Maya's hand. Our agreement is concluded, Catherine said. $10 million. Tax-free. And a first-class ticket to anywhere in the world, leaving tonight. Maya looked down at the envelope. She didn't reach for it. She stared at it, as if it were a dirty napkin. You think this is over? Maya asked softly. I think the job is done, Catherine replied, her eyes narrowing slightly. Julian is in prison. Your father is avenged. And you are a very rich young woman. Take the money, Maya. Go live your life. Maya laughed. It wasn't the fake, ditzy laugh of Trixie. It was a dry, humorless sound. She reached out, picked up the envelope, and weighed it in her hand. 10 million, Maya mused. That's a lot of money. It's certainly more than my father had when he died. He died owing the bank 300,000. I can't bring him back, Maya, Catherine said, her voice softening just a fraction. But I can give you the freedom he wanted for you. Maya looked at Catherine, her eyes hardening. Freedom? You think I did this for a vacation? You think I slept in that man's bed, listened to his snoring, and laughed at his terrible jokes just so I could buy a condo? With a sudden, violent motion, Maya ripped the envelope in half. The sound of the tearing paper was shocking. She tore it again and again until the check worth $10 million was nothing but confetti. She let the pieces flutter down onto Julian's pristine desk. Catherine didn't flinch, but her blood went cold. That was a mistake. No, Maya said, leaning forward, placing her hands on the desk and bringing her face close to Catherine's. The mistake was thinking you could buy me off like one of Julian's mistresses. I'm not buying you off, Catherine said, her voice dropping to a warning growl. I'm paying you for a service. You are an employee, and you have been terminated. I'm not an employee, Maya whispered. I'm a partner. Catherine sat very still. The word hung in the air between them, heavy and dangerous. Partner. I don't have partners, Catherine said slowly. I have subordinates. And I have enemies. Which one are you trying to be? Maya straightened up, brushing a piece of the torn check off her sleeve. She walked over to the window, looking out at the city that Julian had claimed to own. You need to fill the empty seat on the board of directors, Maya said, her back to Catherine. Julian's seat is vacant. The bylaws state it must be filled within 48 hours to maintain a quorum. I have a candidate in mind, Catherine lied. General Holloway. A war hero. Safe. Boring. Exactly what the stock market needs. General Holloway is a senile old man who falls asleep in meetings, Maya countered, turning around. He won't protect you from the wolves, Catherine. And the wolves are coming. You think destroying Julian ended the danger? You just created a power vacuum. Every competitor, every regulator, and every corrupt politician Julian paid off is going to come for a piece of the carcass. Maya walked back to the desk. You need someone who knows where the bodies are buried. You need someone who knows the code. You need me. You want a seat on the board? Catherine asked, incredulous. You're 25 years old. You have no experience. The shareholders would revolt. The shareholders love me, Maya smiled. I'm the hero of the story, remember? The brave whistleblower who took down the corrupt tyrant. My approval rating on social media is higher than yours. I trended worldwide last night. Hashtag Queen Maya. Virality is not a qualification for corporate governance, Catherine snapped. The answer is no. Now get out of my office before I call security. Maya didn't move. Her smile faded, replaced by a look of cold, hard leverage. You call security, and I release the rest of the drive, Maya said. Catherine paused. What rest of the drive? You gave the evidence to the FBI. It's public record. I gave the FBI the folder labeled Julian, Maya corrected. I didn't give them the folder labeled the board. Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. What are you talking about? Come on, Catherine. Do you really think Julian acted alone? Maya's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Julian was the face, but he wasn't the only one stealing. I found the minutes from the private meetings. I found the authorization signatures for the illegal dumping. Signatures from the CFO. Signatures from the vice chairman. Maya leaned in. And I found a transfer authorization from 2018. A transfer of $2 million to a shell company in Panama. It was signed by you. Catherine's heart stopped. She remembered that transfer. It wasn't embezzlement. It was a ransom payment to kidnappers who had taken 2 of their engineers in Nigeria. Julian had refused to pay it, saying it violated policy. Catherine had paid it secretly to save their lives. But on paper, without context, it looked like money laundering. That money saved lives, Catherine whispered. I know that, Maya shrugged. But the FBI doesn't. And the press certainly won't care about the nuance. To them, it will just look like the wife was in on the scam. Maya pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket, a printout of the transfer document with Catherine's signature highlighted in yellow. She placed it gently on top of the torn check. "This is your insurance policy, Catherine. And this is mine." Maya smoothed the paper out. "I want Julian's seat. I want a salary of $5 million a year. And I want the corner office next to this one." She looked at Catherine, her eyes clear and unblinking. "You invited a viper into your bed to kill a rat, Catherine. You can't be surprised when the viper decides it likes the warmth." Catherine looked at the document. She looked at the young woman she had underestimated. She realized with a sinking feeling that she hadn't just hired a spy, she had trained a successor. Maya Stone was exactly who Catherine had been 30 years ago: hungry, brilliant, and utterly ruthless. Catherine slowly picked up the document. She didn't tear it up. She slid it into her drawer and locked it. "The board meets at 9 a.m. tomorrow," Catherine said, her voice flat. "Don't be late." Maya smiled, a genuine, terrifying smile. "I'm never late, partner." She turned and walked out of the office, the click of her heels sounding like the ticking of a bomb that had just been reset. The story now expands. We have established the internal conflict, Maya versus Catherine, but to keep the audience hooked for the final act, we must introduce the external threat, the silent partner. For the next 2 weeks, the world couldn't get enough of Catherine Ashford. She was everywhere. Her face was on the cover of Time, Forbes, and Vanity Fair. The headlines were variations of the same worshipful theme: the Iron Widow, the savior of Ashford Global, the woman who cleaned house. To the public, the narrative was perfect. It was a modern fairy tale of justice. The loyal wife, scorned by an arrogant billionaire, rises up, destroys him with wit and grace, and takes her rightful place on the throne. Social media was ablaze with fan edits of her drinking that glass of champagne on the balcony. They called it the sip heard round the world. But the reality inside the penthouse suite was a cold, suffocating war. Catherine sat in the makeup chair in her office, preparing for yet another interview. This time with Anderson Cooper. A stylist was fussing with her hair, spraying a cloud of lacquer that made Catherine cough. "You look radiant, Mrs. Ashford," the stylist chirped. "The public just loves this white knight look." Catherine forced a smile in the mirror. "Thank you." She didn't feel radiant. She felt trapped. The white knight armor was heavy. Every interview was a minefield where she had to lie. She had to pretend she was shocked by Julian's crimes, when in reality, she had known about the moral rot for years. She had to pretend she was heartbroken, when she was actually terrified. And worst of all, she had to pretend that her new board member, Maya Stone, was a brilliant young prodigy she had discovered, rather than a blackmailer holding a knife to her throat. Maya was playing the part perfectly. She was the darling of the press tour. Hashtag Queen Maya was trending higher than Catherine. The young demographic loved her, the Gen Z spy who took down a boomer tyrant. Maya gave interviews wearing combat boots and designer blazers, speaking about transparency and accountability, all while sitting in the corner office she had extorted from Catherine. Catherine watched Maya on the office TV, giving a soundbite to a reporter. "We're cleaning up the culture," Maya told the camera, her smile bright and predatory. "Catherine and I are a team. We don't keep secrets." Catherine signaled for the stylist to stop. "That's enough. Leave us." The room cleared. Catherine stared at the TV, watching Maya's performance. They were locked in a stalemate. Maya had the evidence of the ransom payment. Catherine had the power of the CEO's seat. They smiled at each other in meetings and plotted against each other in private. It was a cold war, fought with passive-aggressive emails and silence. But the war was about to change fronts. Catherine's phone buzzed on the vanity table. She glanced at it, expecting a message from her PR team or perhaps another demand from Maya. It was a text message. Sender, unknown ID. Location, encrypted. Catherine picked up the phone. She swiped the screen. The message was short, just 5 words, but they made the blood drain from her face faster than any threat Maya had ever made. He wasn't the only one. Catherine stared at the screen. Her thumb hovered over the reply button. Who was this? A prank? A journalist digging for dirt? A second message appeared, followed by an image attachment. The money didn't stop with Julian. Catherine tapped the image. It was a bank statement. A grainy, low-resolution photo of a wire transfer document from 2019. It showed a transfer of $2 million from the Ashford slush fund account, the same account Julian used for bribes. But the recipient wasn't Julian. It wasn't Trixie. It wasn't a contractor. The money went to a shell company called Cerberus Holdings LLC. Catherine knew every shell company in the Ashford portfolio. She had audited the books herself. She had never heard of Cerberus. She sat up straight, the hairspray forgotten. Julian was in prison. Maya was in the next room. Who was Cerberus? And who was sending her this proof? She typed a reply, her fingers shaking slightly. Who is this? The response was instant. A friend. Check the filing address for Cerberus. And watch your back. The senator is angry. The senator? Catherine dropped the phone. The room suddenly felt very cold. Julian had many friends in Washington, but the senator usually referred to only one man, Senator Marcus Sterling, the chairman of the Ethics Committee. A man so powerful he didn't need to shout to be heard. He just whispered, and laws changed. If Sterling was involved, if Julian was paying him, then destroying Julian hadn't cut off the head of the snake. It had just annoyed the dragon. Catherine canceled the interview with Anderson Cooper. She feigned a migraine, a lie that was becoming dangerously close to the truth. She locked the door to her office, pulled the blinds, and sat at her computer. She needed to know what Cerberus Holdings was. For 3 hours, she dug. Catherine wasn't just a CEO, she was a forensic accountant by trade. She knew how to follow digital breadcrumbs that other people missed. She traced the LLC registration from Delaware to the Cayman Islands, and finally, to a registered agent in Panama. It was a maze designed to be unsolvable, but the texter had given her a key. Check the filing address. She pulled up the original incorporation documents for Cerberus. The address listed for the managing member was a P.O. box in Arlington, Virginia. Catherine cross-referenced the P.O. box against public records. Nothing. It was a ghost box. She cross-referenced it against the Ashford Global Vendor List. Nothing. Then, she cross-referenced it against Julian's personal travel logs, the one she had seized from his secretary. On June 12, 2019, the day the LLC was formed, Julian's private jet had flown to Dulles Airport in D.C. He had a dinner meeting listed on his calendar. M.S., the Capitol Grill. M.S. Marcus Sterling. Catherine sat back, her heart hammering against her ribs. It made terrifying sense. Julian was arrogant, but he wasn't politically savvy. He had needed protection to bypass the environmental regulations for his new tower. He had needed the zoning laws changed. He couldn't do that alone. He needed a heavyweight in Washington. And Senator Sterling was the heavyweight champion. If Julian was funneling millions to Sterling through this Cerberus shell company, then the entire Ashford empire was built on federal bribery. And now that Julian was in prison and Catherine had liquidated the slush fund to pay for the charity, the payments to the senator had stopped. Catherine realized with a jolt of horror that the silent partner wasn't silent because he was shy. He was silent because he was deadly, and he was currently waiting for a check that wasn't coming. The phone on her desk rang. It wasn't her cell. It was the secure landline, the one used for emergency board communications. Catherine picked it up slowly. "This is Catherine. Mrs. Ashford," a male voice said. It was smooth, deep, and sounded like expensive scotch. "This is Senator Sterling's office. The senator sends his congratulations on your recent promotion." "Thank you," Catherine said, her grip tightening on the receiver. "The senator is wondering if the existing arrangements regarding the Cerberus account will continue under your leadership," the voice said. "He noticed a delay in this month's processing." "I'm reviewing all accounts," Catherine said, trying to keep her voice steady. "There are some irregularities. We would hate for irregularities to become investigations," the voice purred. "The senator values loyalty, Mrs. Ashford, just as he valued it in Julian. It would be a shame if the Department of Justice decided to look closer at your signature on those ransom payments." The line went dead. Catherine stared at the receiver. He knew. He knew about the ransom. He knew about Maya's blackmail material. She wasn't fighting a war on 2 fronts anymore. She was fighting on 3. And this new enemy had the power to put her in a cell right next to Julian. She needed answers. And there was only one person who could give them to her. She grabbed her coat. She was going to prison. The maximum security federal penitentiary was a stark contrast to the glass tower Catherine had just left. It was a fortress of concrete and razor wire, squatting on the edge of the city like a gray toad. Catherine had to pass through 3 checkpoints. She had to surrender her phone, her purse, and even her wedding ring, which she had taken off weeks ago, but put back on for this meeting, purely for psychological warfare. She sat in the visitation room on the attorney's side. Because she was still technically the legal representative of the Ashford Trust, she was granted a contact visit. No glass, just a metal table bolted to the floor. The door buzzed open. Julian Ashford shuffled in. Catherine almost didn't recognize him. It had only been 3 weeks, but he had aged 10 years. The tan was gone, replaced by a prison pallor. His hair, usually dyed and styled, was gray at the roots and thinning. He wore an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. He sat down opposite her. He didn't look angry. He looked broken. "Hello, Julian," Catherine said softly. He looked at her hands, then up at her face. His eyes were hollow. "You look good, Cat. White suits you. It's the color of the executioner." "I didn't come here to gloat," Catherine said. "Then why did you come?" Julian laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "To check if I'm suffering? I am. The food is inedible, the bed is a slab of rock, and my cellmate is an arsonist who talks to his socks. Are you happy?" "I came to ask about Cerberus," Catherine said. The smile vanished from Julian's face. The broken man disappeared, replaced by the terrified boy she had seen in the diary. He leaned across the table, his chains rattling. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't say that name in here." "I know about the payments, Julian," Catherine pressed. "I know about Senator Sterling. I know you were paying him $2 million a year." "I had to," Julian hissed, glancing at the guards. "He owns the zoning commission. He owns the regulators. If I stopped paying, the tower would have been condemned. The stock would have crashed. So you bribed a federal official," Catherine said. "And now the payments have stopped because I liquidated the accounts." Julian's face went white. You stopped the payments?" "I didn't know they existed." "Oh my God." Julian put his head in his hands. "You idiot. You killed us. You killed us both." "Why?" Catherine demanded. "He's just a politician. We can expose him." Julian looked up, his eyes wide with genuine fear. "You think I was the boss?" "Cat, look at me. I was the face. I was the puppet. Sterling is the hand inside the puppet. He doesn't just take bribes. He was the Ashford Global Strategy. He told me which companies to buy. He told me which rivals to destroy." Julian grabbed her wrist. His grip was weak, desperate. "Why do you think I went after Dominic Stone?" Julian whispered. "It wasn't my idea. Sterling wanted Stone's encryption technology for a defense contract. He told me to crush him. He told me to bury him. I didn't want Dominic to die. Sterling made me do it." Catherine pulled her hand away, horrified. The rabbit hole wasn't just deep, it was bottomless. "He called me today," Catherine said. "He threatened me." "Then you do whatever he says," Julian begged. "You pay him. You sell the building. You do whatever he wants. Because if you don't, he won't just put you in prison, Cat. He'll have you killed." Dominic Stone didn't commit suicide. Sterling's people cleaned up the loose end. The buzzer sounded. The guard stepped forward. "Time's up." Julian stood up, panicked. "Cat, listen to me. Pay him. Don't fight him. You can't beat him." As the guards dragged him away, Catherine sat alone at the metal table. She had thought she was playing chess against a cheating husband. Then she thought she was playing against a greedy spy. Now, she realized she had been playing checkers while a grandmaster held a gun to her head. She stood up. She smoothed her white suit. Julian was wrong. She wasn't going to pay the senator. She was going to need an ally. And there was only one person crazy enough, dangerous enough, and compromised enough to help her fight a war this big. She needed Maya Stone. Catherine walked out of the prison gates with a calmness she didn't feel. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The conversation with Julian had changed everything. She had walked in looking for financial clarity and walked out with a death warrant. The parking lot of the penitentiary was vast and empty, save for a few scattered cars belonging to visitors and staff. The sky had turned a bruised shade of purple as the sun set, casting long, skeletal shadows across the asphalt. Catherine reached her car, a sensible black sedan she used for low-profile errands. She pressed the unlock button on her key fob. The lights flashed. She opened the door and tossed her purse onto the passenger seat. But as she turned to get in, she stopped. Something was wrong. She looked down at the rear tire. It was slashed, not just punctuated with a nail, but sliced open with a knife, the rubber gaping like a wound. Catherine's breath hitched. She stepped back, scanning the empty lot. That's when she saw it. Parked 3 rows back, in the darkest corner of the lot, was a black SUV. The engine was idling, a low, menacing rumble in the quiet evening. The windows were tinted so dark they were like mirrors. It had no license plates. Catherine froze. Sterling's people. Julian's warning echoed in her ears. He won't just put you in prison. He'll have you killed. The SUV's headlights flicked on. High beams. Blinding white light pinned Catherine against her own car. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She knew that running would make her prey. Instead, she stared directly into the blinding lights. She raised her chin. She stood there for 10 seconds, letting them know she saw them, letting them know she wasn't cowering. Then, with deliberate slowness, she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She held it up, aiming the camera at the SUV. The engine of the SUV revved, a growl of aggression. For a terrifying second, Catherine thought they were going to charge. She braced herself for the impact. But then, the reverse lights flashed. The SUV backed out slowly, tires crunching on the gravel, and peeled away toward the exit. They weren't there to kill her. Not yet. They were there to deliver a message. We can get to you anywhere. Catherine let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Her hands were shaking so badly, she almost dropped the phone. She looked at her slashed tire. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't call a tow truck and wait in the dark. She got into the car, locked the doors, and started the engine. She drove on the rim. The sound of metal grinding against asphalt was deafening, a screech of defiance as she limped the car out of the lot and onto the main highway. She didn't stop until she was back in the city, under the safety of streetlights and surveillance cameras. She pulled into the underground garage of Ashford Tower, leaving the ruined car in the middle of the aisle. She took the private elevator straight to the penthouse. She needed a war room, and she needed a soldier. Maya Stone was sitting in the corner office, her new office, feet propped up on the desk, scrolling through her phone. She looked bored. She looked like a girl who had won the lottery and was already tired of the shopping spree. The door flew open. Catherine marched in, still wearing her white coat, her hair slightly wind-blown, her eyes wild. Maya looked up, raising an eyebrow. "Don't you knock? I thought we established boundaries." "Shut up," Catherine snapped. She walked over to the windows and yanked the blinds shut, plunging the room into semi-darkness. "Okay," Maya said slowly, dropping her feet to the floor. "You're acting weird. Did Julian cry? Did he beg for mercy?" "Julian is the least of our problems," Catherine said. She turned to Maya. "You said you found a transfer to a shell company. Cerberus Holdings." "Yeah," Maya nodded. $2 million. Signed by you. My insurance policy." "It's not insurance," Catherine said grimly. "It's a target." Catherine pulled a chair and sat down directly across from Maya. "Do you know who Cerberus is?" "Some offshore account," Maya shrugged. "Probably Julian's drug dealer or a mistress." "It's Senator Marcus Sterling." Maya went still. The boredom vanished instantly. "The chairman of the ethics committee?" "Yes," Catherine confirmed. Julian wasn't just embezzling. He was bribing a federal official to bypass zoning laws and environmental regulations. "Sterling is the one who ordered the hit on your father's company." Maya's face lost all color. "What?" "Sterling wanted your father's encryption tech for a defense contract," Catherine explained. "He told Julian to destroy Dominic Stone. Julian was just the weapon. Sterling was the hand." Maya stood up, her hands clenching into fists. "You're lying. You're trying to scare me." "I just left the prison," Catherine said. "Julian told me everything. And when I walked out to my car, my tires were slashed and a black ops SUV was waiting for me. Sterling knows we stopped the payments. He knows we have the records. He's cleaning up loose ends, Maya. And we are the loose ends." Maya stared at Catherine. She looked for the lie, but she saw the fear in the older woman's eyes. She realized that the game had changed. They weren't playing for money anymore. "So what do we do?" Maya asked, her voice quiet. "We go to the FBI?" "We can't," Catherine shook her head. "Sterling owns the DOJ Oversight Committee. If we hand over the evidence, it will disappear, and we will have a car accident within 24 hours. "So we're dead," Maya said, sinking back into her chair. "That's what you're saying. We're dead." "No," Catherine said. Her voice hardened. "We have one advantage. Sterling thinks I'm just a scorned wife. And he thinks you're just a greedy influencer. He doesn't know what we can do." Catherine leaned forward. "You hacked Julian's server in 3 months. How long would it take you to hack a senator?" Maya looked up. A A spark lit in her eyes, the same dangerous spark Catherine had seen on the balcony. Sterling uses military-grade encryption, Maya said, her brain already working. But he's arrogant. He probably uses a private server for his dirty work. If I can get close enough to his personal device, I can clone it. How close? Catherine asked. 10 feet. Bluetooth range. Catherine nodded. She pulled a printed invitation from her pocket. It was on heavy cream cardstock with gold embossing. The Sterling Foundation Annual Fundraiser. Tonight, 8 p.m., the Grand Ballroom, the Ritz-Carlton. He's hosting a party tonight, Catherine said. I'm on the guest list as the CEO of Ashford Global. He expects me to come and kiss the ring. He expects me to beg. She slid the invitation across the desk to Maya. I'm going to walk right up to him, Catherine said. I'm going to shake his hand. And while I keep him busy, you are going to steal his life. For the next 2 hours, the penthouse suite transformed into a tactical command center. The animosity between the two women didn't disappear, but it was shelved. They moved with the efficiency of soldiers in a foxhole. Catherine handled the logistics. Maya handled the tech. Maya sat surrounded by laptops, cables, and code scrolling across 3 screens. She wasn't the polished board member anymore. She was the hacker who had dismantled Julian's life. I'm building a cloning relay, Maya explained, soldering a small chip onto a device that looked like a glamorous compact mirror. It's a sniffer. If I get this within 5 feet of his phone, it will bypass the handshake protocol and mirror his drive. It's illegal. Highly illegal. Like Guantanamo Bay illegal. Add it to the list, Catherine said dryly. She was pacing the room, reviewing the floor plans of the Ritz-Carlton. Security will be tight. Secret Service detail, plus Sterling's private contractors. We can't bring weapons. We can't bring bulky tech. This is all I need, Maya said, snapping the compact shut. It looks like makeup. Security won't blink. What about the extraction? Catherine asked. Once we have the data, they'll know. His phone will notify him of a sync attempt. We have a 3-minute window, Maya said. From the moment the sync starts, his security software will flag an anomaly. It will take them 3 minutes to trace the signal source to me. 3 minutes, Catherine repeated. So I have to keep him distracted for 3 minutes while you stand next to him, terrified, holding a compact mirror? You have to make him angry, Maya corrected. When people are angry, they stop looking at their notifications. You need to provoke him. You need to make him focus entirely on you. Catherine stopped pacing. She looked at her reflection in the glass window, the white suit, the severe hair. She looked like a victim. She looked like exactly what Sterling expected. I can do that, Catherine said. I know exactly what buttons to push. She turned to Maya. But there's one problem. You're not on the list. Security won't let you within a mile of that ballroom. Maya smiled. She walked over to her designer bag and pulled out a stack of ID cards. Catherine, please. I spent 6 months being tricksy. I have a fake ID for every occasion. Tonight, I'm not Maya Stone, board member. I'm Chloe, the cater waiter from the staffing agency. She held up a Ritz-Carlton staff badge. I'll be serving champagne, Maya said. And I'll make sure the senator's glass is never empty. Catherine looked at the young woman. She saw the brilliance, the recklessness, and the courage. She realized that Julian had been a fool. He had chased Maya for her youth, never realizing that her mind was the most dangerous thing about her. One rule, Catherine said. If we get caught, you run. You take the drive and you run. You don't wait for me. Why? Maya asked, pausing. Because you have a future, Catherine said quietly. I'm just cleaning up my past. Maya looked at her for a long moment. There was a flicker of respect, perhaps even concern. But she pushed it down. Let's get the data first, Maya said. Then we can decide who plays the martyr. She tossed Catherine a small earpiece. Put this in. Channel 1. If I say abort, you drop to the floor because it means they've made us. Catherine put the earpiece in. She smoothed her jacket. She looked at the clock. 7:30 p.m. Let's go crash a party, Catherine said. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was a sea of black ties, diamonds, and political favors. The air smelled of expensive perfume and the distinct, metallic scent of power. Catherine Ashford stood at the top of the marble staircase, looking down at the crowd. She was wearing a white silk gown that stood out like a beacon in the sea of dark suits. It wasn't a fashion statement. It was a tactical decision. She needed to be visible. She needed to be the target. She touched her ear, adjusting the diamond earring that concealed the micro-receiver. "Comms check," she whispered, barely moving her lips. "Read you 5 by 5. Maya's voice crackled in her ear. "I'm in position. The champagne is warm, and the tips are terrible. Let's get this over with." Catherine took a deep breath and began her descent. Every head turned. The room hushed. To them, she was the grieving widow who had valiantly saved her company. They smiled, they nodded, they whispered. Catherine smiled back, playing the role, but her eyes were scanning the room for only one man. She found him near the orchestra pit. Senator Marcus Sterling. He was taller than he looked on television. Silver-haired, tanned, with a smile that had been pulled and focus grouped to perfection. He was holding court, surrounded by a ring of donors and lobbyists who hung on his every word. He looked untouchable. He looked like a man who slept soundly because he owned the people who made the nightmares. Surrounding him was his security detail, for men in ill-fitting suits with earpieces. They weren't looking at the senator. They were watching the perimeter. They were the obstacle. "I see him," Catherine murmured. 4 guards. Tight formation. "I see them too," Maya replied. "Wait for the waiter with the hors d'oeuvres to pass. I'm going to slip in behind him." Catherine reached the bottom of the stairs. A man in a tuxedo approached her, the CEO of a rival defense contractor. "Catherine, so good to see you," he boomed, blocking her path. "Excuse me, Bill," Catherine said, sidestepping him with cold efficiency. "I have a donor to greet." She walked straight toward Sterling. The security detail shifted, closing ranks. One of the guards stepped forward to intercept her. "Ma'am, the senator is in a private conversation." "It's all right, Johnson," Sterling's voice boomed. The senator waved the guard away. He turned to Catherine, his smile widening, but his eyes remaining flat and dead. "Mrs. Ashford, I wasn't sure you'd make it. It's been a difficult month for you." "I wouldn't miss it, Senator," Catherine said, extending her hand. "You've been such a silent partner in our success. I felt I owed you a personal thank you." Sterling's smile didn't waver, but the air temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. He took her hand. His grip was dry and crushing. "Loyalty is a rare currency, Catherine," Sterling said, pulling her slightly closer. "I'm glad to see you understand its value." "Oh, I do," Catherine said, locking eyes with him. "That's why I'm here. We need to discuss the future of our arrangement." "By all means," Sterling gestured to the space next to him. "Let's talk." Catherine moved into the circle. She was now 2 feet away from the most dangerous man in Washington. "Maya," she whispered. "Green light." Catherine stood shoulder to shoulder with the senator, holding a glass of wine she didn't drink. She needed to make him angry. She needed to make him focus entirely on her face so he wouldn't notice the waitress slipping up behind him with a compact mirror. "This is a lovely party, Marcus," Catherine said, dropping the formalities. "It must cost a fortune. Good thing you have so many generous friends." Sterling took a sip of his scotch. "Generosity keeps the wheels of democracy turning, Catherine. You should know. You've benefited from those wheels for years." "I benefited from ignorance," Catherine corrected. "Julian paid you." "I didn't know the price was illegal." Sterling chuckled low in his throat. "Illegal is such a pedestrian word. We call it lobbying. And frankly, my dear, your sudden moral compass is boring. Are you going to restart the payments to Cerberus? Or do I need to call the DOJ about that Nigerian ransom?" "I'm not paying you a dime," Catherine said loudly. Heads turned nearby. Sterling's jaw tightened. This was the reaction she wanted. "Keep your voice down," he hissed. "Why?" Catherine asked, stepping closer, invading his personal space. "Are you afraid your donors will find out that the chairman of the ethics committee is running a protection racket?" "I am afraid for you," Sterling whispered, his eyes narrowing into slits. "You are playing a dangerous game, little girl. You think because you took down Julian, you can take down me? Julian was a golden retriever. I am a wolf. If you don't authorize that wire transfer by morning, I will have your assets frozen, your reputation destroyed, and your life ended. Do you understand me?" "I understand," Catherine said. "I understand that you are a small, greedy man who is terrified of exposure." Sterling's face turned red. He was furious. He was focused entirely on her eyes, on her insults. He didn't notice the waitress in the Ritz-Carlton uniform who had just stopped 3 feet behind him, holding a tray of empty glasses. "Maya," Catherine thought. "Do it now." Maya, disguised as Chloe, held the tray with one hand. In the other, hidden beneath a cocktail napkin, was the compact mirror. She tilted it toward the senator's jacket pocket where his phone was outlined against the silk. Catherine watched Sterling's eyes. He was vibrating with rage. "You are nothing," Sterling spat. "You are a widow living on borrowed time. And you," Catherine smiled, "are about to be obsolete." 50%, Maya's voice whispered in her ear. "Keep him talking. He's reaching for his pocket." Sterling's hand twitched toward his phone. He wanted to call security. He wanted to end this. Catherine grabbed his arm. It was a shocking breach of etiquette. "Don't you walk away from me, Marcus." "I'm not finished." Sterling froze, stunned by her audacity. He ripped his arm away. "Get your hands off me." 70%, Maya whispered. "Almost there. Don't let him move." The tension in the circle was razor sharp. The security guards were stepping in now, sensing the escalation. "Ma'am, you need to step back," the lead guard rumbled, reaching for Catherine. "I'm leaving," Catherine shouted, throwing her hands up. She needed 5 more seconds. Just 5. Sterling was breathing heavily, his face flushed. "Escort Mrs. Ashford out, and ensure she is banned from the property." "With pleasure," the guard said, grabbing Catherine's elbow. 90%, Maya whispered. Come on, come on." Catherine dug her heels into the carpet. "You can ban me, Marcus, but you can't ban the truth. Get her out." Sterling roared, losing his composure completely. 100, Maya said. "Got it. Package secured. I'm moving." On the periphery of Catherine's vision, she saw the waitress turn and walk briskly toward the kitchen doors. The compact mirror was snapped shut and back in her apron pocket. Catherine instantly stopped fighting. She went limp in the guard's grip. "Fine," Catherine said, smoothing her dress. "I'm going. I've seen enough." She let the guards drag her toward the exit. She watched Sterling pull his phone out of his pocket. He frowned at the screen. It had buzzed. A notification. Unrecognized Bluetooth sync attempt. Sterling looked up. He scanned the room. He saw Catherine leaving. Then he looked at the space behind him. He saw the kitchen doors swinging shut. His eyes widened. He realized. "Stop," Sterling shouted, pointing at the kitchen. "Stop that waitress. The one with the tray. Stop her." The guards hesitated. They were holding Catherine. "Not her," Sterling screamed, pushing past his donors. "The waitress. She has my phone. Lock down the building. No one leaves. Run," Catherine whispered into her comms. "Maya, run. I'm already at the loading dock." Maya's voice came back, breathless. "I have the data, but they're sealing the exits." Catherine was shoved out the front doors by the security team. She stumbled onto the sidewalk, the cool night air hitting her face. She was free, but Maya was still inside. Catherine turned back to the hotel. The doors were being locked. Sirens wove through the distance. She grabbed her phone. "Maya, did you get out?" "Static." "Maya, I'm out." Maya's voice crackled, sounding winded. "I jumped the fence. I'm in the alley. Pick me up. Now." Catherine sprinted toward the valet stand. She didn't wait for a ticket. She jumped into the first taxi in the line. "Drive," she screamed at the driver, throwing a wad of cash onto the front seat. "Around back. The alley. Go." As the taxi screeched away, Catherine looked back at the Ritz-Carlton. The lights were flashing. The beast was awake. They had the evidence. They had the smoking gun. But now, they had to survive the night. The taxi screeched around the corner of the loading dock, its tires smoking against the asphalt. The alley was dark, smelling of wet cardboard and exhaust fumes. "Stop," Catherine screamed at the driver. The car shuddered to a halt. The rear door flew open before the wheels stopped moving. Maya Stone threw herself into the back seat. She was breathless, her hair wild, her Ritz-Carlton apron torn at the shoulder. She slammed the door shut and locked it. "Go," Maya yelled. "Drive. Get us to the highway." The taxi driver, sensing the panic and seeing the $100 bills Catherine kept throwing at him, floored the accelerator. The car fishtailed out of the alley just as 2 black SUVs with tinted windows turned the corner behind them. "They saw us," Catherine said, looking out the rear window. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a sledgehammer. "They're following. They can't stop us," Maya said, pulling the compact mirror, the cloning device, out of her pocket. A small green light was pulsing on the side. "I have the data. The transfer is complete. If they ram us, it automatically uploads to a cloud server in Switzerland." I set a dead man switch. Catherine looked at the young woman. Maya wasn't shaking. She was grinning. It was the adrenaline smile of someone who had just walked into the dragon's lair and stolen its gold. "You're insane," Catherine breathed. "I'm effective," Maya corrected. She tapped the device. "I have everything, Catherine. I have his texts. I have his emails. I have the wire transfer logs to Cerberus. I even have the GPS data of every meeting he's had with Julian for the last 5 years." The taxi wove through traffic, running a red light. The black SUVs were falling back, caught in the gridlock of the city night. Catherine watched them disappear in the distance. She slumped back against the seat, the tension draining out of her muscles, leaving her trembling. They had done it. They had walked into the most secure room in Washington and mugged a senator. "Where are we going?" the driver shouted from the front. Catherine looked at Maya. They couldn't go back to the penthouse. Sterling would have men waiting there. They couldn't go to the police. "Not yet. Just drive," Catherine said. "Head north. Find a diner. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere with coffee." She looked out the window as the city lights blurred past. Julian was in a cell. The senator was exposed. And Catherine Ashford, the woman who had spent 30 years following the rules, had just broken every single one of them. And God help her, she liked it. It was 3 a.m. in a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of Baltimore. The fluorescent lights hummed with a low buzz. The only other customers were 2 long-haul truckers eating pie in silence. Catherine and Maya sat in a red vinyl booth. On the table between them sat 2 mugs of black coffee and a laptop. Maya was typing furiously. "Okay, the encryption is broken. I'm looking at the files now." She turned the laptop screen toward Catherine. It was a treasure trove. There were emails detailing bribes to judges. There were text messages orchestrating the smear campaigns against rivals. And there, in a folder labeled active, was the smoking gun. A draft of a bill Sterling was pushing through the Senate. A bill written specifically to deregulate the toxic waste that Ashford Global was dumping. "We have him," Catherine whispered. "This isn't just a scandal. This is 20 years in federal prison." "We post this at 6 a.m., Maya said, her face illuminated by the blue light of the screen. "By the time he wakes up, the FBI will be knocking on his door. And this time, he won't be able to call the director for a favor." Catherine picked up her coffee mug. Her hand was steady. She looked at Maya, the enemy who had become an ally, the spy who had become a partner. "You realize what happens next," Catherine said. "We can't go back to normal. We just took down 2 of the most powerful men in the country. There will be others." Maya closed the laptop. She leaned back, crossing her arms. "Good. Normal is boring. I was getting tired of corporate board meetings anyway." "We're going to have enemies," Catherine warned. "Powerful enemies. Let them come," Maya smiled. "We have the money. We have the tech. And now, we have the reputation." Catherine smiled back. It was the first genuine smile she had felt in months. She raised her coffee mug. "To the future," Catherine said. Maya clinked her mug against Catherine's. "To the hunt." Catherine took a sip of the bitter coffee. She looked out the window at the rising sun. Julian was gone. The senator was ruined. But as she watched the lights spread across the horizon, she knew one thing for certain. The world was full of men who thought they were untouchable. Men who thought they could lie, cheat, and steal without consequence. She used to fear them. Now, she was going to find them. Catherine Ashford had destroyed a billionaire in a single night. She had dismantled a senator in a single party. She was just getting started. Catherine won the battle, and she definitely won the war. But the list of corrupt elites is long, and her appetite for justice is growing. Who should Catherine and Maya target next? Should they go after the corrupt banker who launders cartel money? Or the lying doctor poisoning his patients for profit? Subscribe and tell me in the comments right now. See you in the next video.